And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with yours truly and Heather Lofthouse.
Hello.
Heather, what do you think? How did that discussion last night, that interview with George Stephanopoulos, did that, in your view, calm the Democrats' nerves? Are we going to see now an easy shot for Joe Biden?
I mean, do I have to answer it in one question? I mean, one answer, one word? Could have been even better. Could have been worse also. I do think that what I had wanted, which is I think also what a lot of people out there, undecideds, the general public, might have wanted him to be more aware of how he's falling short and to kind of look in the camera and say, I hear you. And when George asked, did you watch the debate? I would have liked to hear him say, yeah, I watched it and it was crappy and I get it. And instead he kept, doing it was a blip and it was one off and look and I'm amazing and my successes and all that. And he didn't connect. And I was hoping he would connect so that people would feel more confident.
I agree with you. I like Joe Biden. I think he's a terrific president. He's been excellent in many, many respects. I have obviously some issues, but Heather, I thought he was evasive and he was in denial. And denial is not just a river in Egypt. It was shocking the extent to which he was not able to say to George Stephanopoulos, look, I know that people are concerned, and I know somebody who's over 81, who stutters and who pauses and who acted like I did last week, is going to cause a lot of people with a lot of concern. And so I am going to have a neurological exam. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to have the results out to people immediately. And I don't think there's any problem, but I want to make sure that people agree with me, and I want to make sure I'm right.
That would have been fabulous.
Well, creeping, I don't know, shall we call it senility for want of a better term? There are better terms.
Feels fair.
You don't expect the person who has it to have the greatest judgment about where he is on that creep.
No, that's part and parcel of the problem. I mean, I think it goes with it. There's built-in denial. And I think that's genetics or epigenetics or survival or whatever it is. I mean, it's part of it.
And I know George Stephanopoulos very well. We worked together in the Clinton administration. I think he is a very able and authentic and careful journalist. I thought he asked hard questions, but they were reasonable questions.
And repeated them
and
when he didn't get an answer.
In various times. And I thought Joe Biden, again, I like Joe Biden. I want to emphasize this.
And his record is, he spoke to, look at my successes, and I've done things that people didn't think I could do, and they've been huge, and all those things are true.
But he answered policy
when
it wasn't a policy question. The questions are all about his capacity. And it wasn't about the past, it's about the future. So I guess I was kind of surprised and shocked that he was not more reflective.
That's it.
I think the problem is that he's surrounded by a small group of people. I've seen this before. I've worked for 3 presidents, and I've worked for a 4th indirectly. And when they get kind of into a situation where they're hunkered down, where they're kind of in a bunker, and the people around them, there are a few number of people, and they're all in a bunker together, then we're in trouble. They can't see anything. And when even when Biden said they are trying to force me out, he said that yesterday in a couple of speeches, they are trying to force me out. Who's they? Who is they?
Right. So is it, I remember feeling like, and this is me being naive, and I admit when I'm naive on this podcast with you and drinking coffee, I used to think there was a Democratic Party with a capital D and a capital P, and there were smart people and a whole bunch of ladies around the table, and people knew things, and they were driving the car, and I was safely in the back.
Heather?
Buckled up.
Heather, there is no Democratic Party. There is a big fundraising machine. That's called the Democratic Party. And then in the Republican side, there's a big kind of cult, kind of getting crazier by the day. But there are no parties any longer. And I think we've got to understand that there are no adults, there are no sort of Democratic leaders who take over and are going to be in control. No. In fact, Democratic members of Congress, senators, I mean, they're all individual entrepreneurs.
Right.
They come together. The senators don't even know the House members if they're in the same party. But the Democratic senators may be coming together a little bit to talk about this. But remember, they're not talking about the nation. They're talking about what's going to happen to the Senate or what's going to happen to the House.
Right.
If Joe Biden is on the ticket, they're worried.
Right.
And they're hearing from more and more constituents and more political operatives that the ship is sinking.
So when he said they, what they was he talking about?
I think that is the symptom of being in the bunker, hunkering down, and not getting good information.
Right.
When you are, the higher you are in any hierarchy, especially president, but if you're the CEO, if you're the president of a university, you are not getting good feedback. You aren't, and you have to beg for it, and you've got to listen carefully for it. The presidency is the worst place. I mean, Richard Nixon was getting nothing. Finally, and this was this was back in the 70s. Finally, senior Democrats and others came to him and said, "You are not going to survive." And even then, he was resistant, and they had to keep on going at it, and to tell him that he had to, if he wanted to avoid a criminal trial, if he wanted to avoid total impeachment, which was very, very likely at that time, he had to leave. But that was an extreme situation. And Biden looks at the polls and he says, "I don't believe the polls." And he hears about the approval ratings. "I don't believe the approval ratings."
Yeah, and he's dismissive of them all.
Well,
yeah. But is that a tactic? I mean, when George Stephanopoulos said, "How will you feel if Trump wins and you were wrong and you've stuck with it and it's the day after, it's November, whatever, 6, 7, 8.
He said if it's January of 2025 and Trump takes over and starts ripping apart everything that you tried to do. And he said, "Well, I'll tell myself I at least did the best I could."
A for effort, right.
Well, that's not enough of a, that's not enough. That's a very, almost narcissistic. I mean, it's silly. I feel silly using the word narcissism about Biden when you have, the narcissist in chief on the other side. But I think Biden needs to, and maybe this is impossible, to have more distance on what is happening.
I mean, the stakes are so high. We keep talking about this, and we actually haven't had a clutch. It's hard to remember what day it is. You and I haven't sat here with our microphones and coffee cups since all of the immunity decisions came down from the Supreme Court.
Well, this is why the stakes are even higher.
That's it.
Because the Supreme Court is now enlarging the power of the presidency, which is fine if you get somebody in there who has good knowledge and good faith and is trying to do the job as it should be, and then is a disaster if you get Donald Trump in there.
Right.
And this is why it's even more disturbing that Biden doesn't have that kind of distance. Now, don't get me wrong about what I'm saying. I haven't made up my mind about what Biden should do or what the Democrats should do, but clearly there is a growing issue, a growing problem. I don't believe polls. I don't go by polls, but clearly on the basis of everything we're seeing and hearing, this is very, very troubling.
Right. But even if you're not, or we are not advocating for one way or another, we have to think we have 90 days until early voting starts?
90 days, in fact, less than that, fewer than 90 days until early voting starts in some states. We've got, less than 7 weeks.
Till the Democratic National Convention.
And you have, you have really a matter of days here. And we've never, in my knowledge, and I'm somewhat of a historian of presidents, never seen anything like this at this point in time. The delegates have already been almost all selected, still a sliver that haven't been. But Joe Biden has got to release them if there is going to be any change. If he sticks to his guns and doesn't release them, then he is the nominee. If he's the nominee, if the polls and the direction of the polls are to be believed, Donald Trump becomes the next president.
I don't like how this is going. Now, did you sleep? I was hoping I would see the interview. I mean, I'm a dreamer here with George Stephanopoulos and I would start to sleep better. But this week since the debate, I mean, is your phone blowing up? I mean, not only do I have text saying, please donate, but just people saying, what do we do? How can I help? Do you know? What does Robert Reich say?
I haven't heard. People don't ask me what does Robert Reich say, but I haven't
They
heard.
should. Or just listen to this podcast.
I haven't heard as much panic, upset, discussion. I mean, I can't walk down the street without people coming up to me who I don't know and saying, what should be done? What are the Democrats going to do? What should... And again, Heather, I'm struck by the difference between the Republicans and Democrats. When the Republicans confront what they have already confronted, a president who lies continually, who called the presidential election of 2020 that it was a stolen election, who refused to go to the inauguration, we know that this is a long, long list.
Can I add to it? Attempted coup? Can I add two impeachments? Can I add some felonies?
You can add everything
Right.
you want. But what the Republicans do is they just guard him. They make a ring around him. They support him. They lie for him. They all adopt his lies. I mean, look at the people who want to be vice presidents. They are even a couple of them who are, I remember, as somewhat reasonable. They're now sounding a lot like Trump. So the Republicans all become Trump when he's in trouble. They go to where he's in a court.
Yep. I'm picturing like a lava lamp where all the blobs just move into the other blob.
And the Democrats are completely the opposite. And the media is the same way. I mean, Fox News is right with Trump no matter what he does. And the mainstream media, even the lefty media, even MSNBC, well, maybe he should be leaving. Maybe it's time. And look, oh dear, what are we going to do? There's a kind of a remarkable asymmetry. And I think it has to do with, fundamentally, the difference between authoritarianism and democracy. Authoritarians are into discipline, hierarchy. They really just, here's the line, we'll get in line.
Salute. Yep.
We'll salute. People who believe in democracy, they believe in democracy. We're going to discuss this. We're going to deliberate.
And voice our worries, which doesn't always help in terms of, messaging.
Well, it doesn't help in terms of messaging, and it doesn't help in terms of where we ultimately go. I mean, what I've seen and what I'm seeing is a pile-on. And when I say a pile-on, I mean that it's very hard for a presidential candidate to get out from under this. Even if the presidential candidate says, I disagree, it doesn't matter because the pile-on continues to undermine the president, the presidential candidate. Donors get worried, spokespeople get worried, people who are out on the outer rims of Biden land say, well, we don't know, we haven't heard from him, and everything gets worse and worse. And the polls, as a result, continue to go down. And as the polls go down further, then the pile-on gets even worse. So I guess if I were predicting, I would say in a few days, Heather, I mean, maybe mid next week, maybe the end of next week, he's going to have to anoint somebody else or else face the prospect of a terrible loss, not only the presidency, but also the Senate and the House.
Yeah. I do feel like George Stephanopoulos tried to get to this a little bit last night, and say, but you see what's happening here. I mean, even if you say you're feeling great and, we think you've done phenomenal things, but what about the larger picture that everyone else is seeing and feeling? How do we, and he didn't really address it.
No. And again, if I were in his position and I were surrounded by a bunch of people and my wife, and they were all saying to me, don't listen to them.
You've got this, yeah.
I would say, I'd be
hold
as
on.
intransigent. I would hold on.
Also, I think he wants Trump to lose and he thinks he can beat him. I think that's part of it.
I'm sure that's part of it. But the question, again, is where we are even a week from now.
Yep.
Now, if he has to anoint somebody else.
Here we go.
Who?
I mean, Kamala Harris. I'm the first to say that.
You are not.
I mean, I think everyone.
But the question is why? Because
exactly.
her polls, again, let's be clear. We're not trusting every poll, but through the last 3.5 years, her polls have been below Biden's.
Right.
So why do you say she's the natural anointing?
Well, some of the reason her polls are low is it turns out that America can be a misogynistic, racist place. Misogynist, racist. So there's that.
You don't say.
I say. So there's
that. But
and
that would argue against having her be the candidate.
No, it's not arguing against. I'm just saying we have to take that into account. We have to take into account the realities of her being a Black woman and how people see her, right? Some people. Now, she can allegedly take all the money easily, if Biden were to anoint her. She is incredibly powerful as it relates to abortion, which is a huge issue. Perhaps she is more distant from the Gaza horrific situation that Biden has been closer to. And so a lot of young progressives and other people are saying, not going to vote for him because I'm voting with my conscience or whatever it is, leaving the top of the ticket blank. Perhaps she can get some of those votes. And I think that would be interesting. And I think she'd be fierce at a debate. That debate where we were worried about Biden and tracking him and trying to see, the things she could say to a convicted felon.
Well, I don't think we should count on there ever being another debate.
Right.
If Trump is ahead by 5 or 6 or 8 points, he's not going to consent to another debate. And Biden, after what happened with the last debate, may never go on, or his handlers may not allow him to go on again. But I agree with you. She is a tough debater. But the real argument is it's the easiest path forward if Biden is not going to continue. It's his, she's his vice president. It's the Biden-Harris campaign.
Yep.
The money can be transferred easily to the Biden-Harris campaign for her. And the organization can also adapt most easily to her. You don't want an open convention. Some people are saying an open convention, which means everybody can get in who wants to get in. I remember the 1968 Democratic Chicago open convention.
Yeah.
Heather, you don't want to go there.
No.
I mean, there were demonstrations, and that made it even an uglier.
Right, and there could be again, by the way.
But it was the Democrats were shown to be in total and utter disarray and chaos, and it hurt them. Hubert Humphrey ultimately became the candidate, and then obviously he was defeated by Richard Nixon. But no, an open convention is not the way to go. But if Harris gets the nod and is anointed by Biden, it's the only way that she can do it, then the question is who becomes her vice president.
Right. Now, and she's known nationally, right? Anyone else who we're talking about a governor from whatever state, I think you're right. I think this would be, if it happens, if Biden chooses it, right? Now, Bill Maher, all these people are coming out and saying open convention would be neat, wouldn't it be? But
I think
it's
this
wild
is
to see
utterly
so many people.
naive. I
Right.
think some journalists and some comedians think,
Comedians.
well, that would be fun.
No.
It'd be entertaining.
Comedians.
They're thinking entertainment.
Right.
No.
Right.
Think about winning.
So back to your point about who would be the Veep's Veep, Joe Biden? No. So a lot of people, people say Gretchen Whitmer. That would be interesting. The first ever double female ticket.
I think that your point about misogyny would be misogyny square if it's a 2 female ticket.
Know. So then, of course, other people have mentioned Shapiro, Josh Shapiro, who is the governor of Pennsylvania.
Well, I think that he is certainly up there in terms of the vice presidential sweepstakes because Pennsylvania is so important. Now, then you have a Black woman, number 1, and a Jewish man, number 2. Still, we're flirting here with American prejudice, but maybe that's the best we can do. I think that the other governor that's often mentioned is Gavin Newsom.
Mm-hmm.
The problem there is twofold. Number 1, California.
Oh, it's
Americans
the worst state.
hate California,
Right.
even though Kamala Harris is from California. They forgive
She
her
feels
that.
less from California than Gavin
But
does.
Gavin Newsom is
Yep.
California personified.
And I think you're right. In Fox News, I mean, he would be eviscerated for that.
But also there is the 12th Amendment,
Right. And
which
so,
says,
So I don't know exactly. I mean, you probably have it memorized and in your pocket. But so basically, both people on the ticket coming from the same state is a problem as it's related to the Electoral College.
exactly. And that's why in the past you've had, for example, Dick Cheney, when he was George W.'s vice president, he changed his residence to Wyoming.
From Florida,
Texas,
that's right. But he had been in Wyoming, and he had been a senator for Wyoming, right? And then he had a home there, but it was his vacation home. So you can get around this.
You can get around it, but it's still
perhaps
tricky.
Kamala's,
no, it's not
address
it's
is
not
DC.
going to happen. I think if I were betting, I would say Josh Shapiro. But the first question is when and if Joe Biden actually drops out.
You said it loudly that he was not.
No, I want to just before we finish this, I want to make a case that Joe Biden should not drop out.
Good. Let's hear it.
And the case would be, number one, an incumbent president is much more powerful than anybody else, even an incumbent vice president. Number two, somebody who has already proven his chops by beating Trump has a great deal of credibility in terms of doing it again. And number three, that the public, although having a lot of doubts about Biden, as we get closer to the election, will have greater and greater doubts about the stability of his opponent, Donald Trump, who is going to be ever more menacing. You know, the Project 2023, the campaign book that was prepared.
2025.
2025? Did I say 2023?
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit
No.
old. That's what Project 2025 was the campaign book essentially for Donald Trump. He disavowed it yesterday. He said,
"What project?"
He
I
said,
mean, it really was remarkable on Truth Social.
He said, "I don't know anything about it." There are 20 people who put it together who were working for him, including the person who was his director of Office of Management and Budget, who was directing the Project 2025.
And it was a classic Trump, I would say tweet, except it wasn't a tweet. It said, "I don't know what that is."
And I disagree with it.
And I completely disagree with it,
Which
not knowing what it is.
Which is very
fascinating.
very tricky.
And some of it's just, insane. And also, I wish them luck.
So
That's what it's
I think the bottom line, Heather, for me, is that we will know much more over the next week if the drumbeat continues to grow so loud, and if the Senate and the senators get together, members of Congress get together, governors get together, if they're all concerned about down ballot consequences of Joe Biden being on the top of the ballot, then they are going to put enormous pressure on the White House. Biden may withstand that pressure,
right.
But I can't guarantee it.
I know. Now, one other question for you, too, is Trump has been, besides his tweet about not knowing what Project 2025 was, his truth, his social, whatever you say that on that platform, he's been...
Untruth,
his
antisocial.
untruth. Yeah,
untruth, antisocial.
His untruth. So he has not been saying much in the past, as we're all levitating.
Which is the best evidence yet that he wants this to play out. He knows it's undermining Biden the longer it goes on, and he doesn't want, at the same time, Biden to pick somebody else. And there is a lot of evidence from the Republicans that they want Biden.
Yeah, I think they do. Look at the polls, But it would be fascinating. You think they'd be shaking in their boots if Vice President Harris comes up?
Well, they're prepared, obviously. They've done a lot of what's called opposition research, which means basically stirring the shit can. But
can you say that on a podcast?
I don't think so. They are preparing advertisements. They're preparing everything in case she does become the nominee. But she's still going to be a fresh face, and it could be that the opposition to Trump is so deep. And remember, we're talking about a limited number of people. They're independents. They are moderates. They are in swing states. They are women. They're going to make the big difference here. Some of them are young. And maybe she is enough to get the election.
Yeah. Amongst people of color as well. I mean, it'll be interesting.
It'll be interesting.
To say the least.
May you live in interesting times.
I think we do.
But it is scary.
It's terrifying, and I just hate that this is where we are. I hate it for
I do too,
everyone. And
Heather. I mean,
I've
spent the last 55 years of my life in and around politics, and writing and watching and advising, and I am very anxious about the future of this country. I'm very anxious about the future of our democracy. I never thought I would be saying that, but I am.
And more so.
Yeah. So on that upbeat note,
more will be revealed, though.
more will be revealed. And look, I want to say to all of you, I know how upsetting all of this is. I know how worrisome it is. But I feel after 55 years of doing this that there is a kind of deep common sense in the American public. There is a kind of goodness I have faith in the American public. And so we're going to get through it.
Thank you for that.
We'll see you next Saturday.